Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. Sue, brilliant to have you here and to be with you again. So to start with, please tell everybody who you are and about the great work that you do.
Okay, hi, Alan. Thanks for having me here. So my name is Sue Bottomley. I am an executive coach and I work with individuals and organizations to bring a different way of being into their beingness. And by that, we ask people to pause, to reflect, to inquire. I run circles. A lot of the work that I deliver is actually through the circle way of engaging and reflecting. And really, for me, circles are that invitation to practice and become more deeply listening, practice deeply listening and being listened to, being heard, being witnessed, validated, respected, and being seen and having a voice, which I think is actually at the root of a lot of the discomforts that I see in society today. So Pause in its little way, Pause being my brand, is the antidote, I think, to a lot of the unrest and unsettling that I see in our communities and individuals that I tend to work with. So that's really in a nutshell. And you can have a look at businesses called Pause Ventures, and we are www.pauseventures.com. And you can contact me, and I'd be very welcome to a conversation at hello@pauseventures.com. So in a nutshell, that's what we are.
Thank you, Sue. And it just strikes me listening to you there that, in the corporate world, for instance, there's so much done in the way of training and development, presentation skills and how to get your message across. And it's all about transmit. Whereas very seldom do you ever hear about corporate organizations focusing on the other side and listening and receiving. Is that your experience as well?
Yes. And a lot of my clients recently have been very close, all the clients that have been sent to me sometimes recently have been very close to burnout. And I know that feeling of not being able to sleep that well, eating the wrong food at the wrong time, one thing or another, just to cope with the everydayness of everything. And the pressures of everything. I've been there. I used to be a corporate banker, and I got out partly for that reason. I see that a lot, and I think the real power for me anyway, the real power for me in a person or a person that I want to engage with is somebody who's got presence, and presence usually comes from there's a stillness, there's a shape of the body. There's an energy that person radiates. There's a confidence that comes out, and there's a sense of safety actually from that as well.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. So, people I want to engage are not necessarily ones that everybody wants to engage, but I think on the whole, and when I work with really senior executives, CEOs, etc., they're wanting that space. Because even though they might be the CEO and they've got lots of different pressures or whatever, they still want a sounding board of someone who can witness their thinking, witness their decisions that they might be making, and actually just witness themselves. It's very rare that you get a mirror that just mirrors back whatever's coming towards them.
Yeah.
There's usually a sort of trying to fix it type attitude going on somewhere down the line. And I think that the real presence is someone who it's touching on a new project that I'm doing actually around belonging, because belonging for a lot of people is about fitting in. Whereas for me, for belonging is about being ourselves. So I think the permission to be ourselves wherever we are is a huge gift that we can give to anybody, and have that person be valued and witnessed and etc. Huge gift that we can give. And I think people with presence and people who command respect have got that. And sometimes it's natural and sometimes it's a learned thing, because there's a lot of unlearning, I think, as well, to get to that space. So go back to your question. I think there's so many pressures now. And actually, I'm finding, and I sometimes find it myself, I'm almost on a hamster wheel, knowing that I want to get off, but I'm not even sure what time of day to get off. It's like what month even to get off. It's like, or do I just wait for a holiday, or do I just wait for, And then I think, like we were showing before, this year I've had 2 broken bones in my foot from doing cardio classes. A fall from walking and tripping over a dog. I mean, the stuff that has gone on to slow me down, and I look at it and think I could get really pissed off, excuse my, or I can just go, okay, the universe is just saying enough. Just listen a bit,
Yeah.
And take a dose of my own medicine, if you want to say that one. So I think we all know, and we all know when we're in sync, out of sync. But I think for me, this presence piece and belonging to ourselves first, and caring for ourselves first is imperative.
Well said.
And I think this is really why I like the values cards and the ValuesJam sessions, because it's that chance to take a step out of the everyday whatever, and a place to reflect and have it shared with someone and seen by someone. Because it's easy to do this stuff in isolation or meditate or visualize or whatever, but actually to have it with a group or with a person is very different.
Yeah, and what a brilliant segue, thank you. So
yeah, it's a pleasure. yeah.
And so I'm just going to tip them out. And how many piles would you like me to make?
Let's go for 3.
Okay, they're different sizes.
Yeah, okay.
And so number 1 is on my left and number 3 is on my right. So which will you choose?
We'll have the one on your left, the top one off your left.
And so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22 cards. So a number between those 2 numbers.
22.
22. The final one. Well, here we go. So you've chosen.
Oh, okay.
What's that reaction?
I was just thinking about that this morning.
Are you serious? What was crossing your mind about reliability?
Well, there were 2 aspects of it. It was like I had a client who we were supposed to be speaking quite early this morning, who 5 minutes before the session didn't show up. Well, text me saying couldn't make. And I just thought, this is about the 3rd time this has happened. Can I, if I was working with this person, could I rely on that person to be committed to or whatever, just a thought, I'm not saying. And then it was like, okay, so is this a mirror to my reliability? I mean, am I reliable, as in other aspects of my life when I could either be more or even to some extent less? Sometimes it can be an obligation. So so it was interesting. So I've done a bit of journaling on this morning.
So the first question in ValuesJam is, what does reliability actually mean? And tapping into the creative side of your mind, what does it look, feel, and sound like? So those 2 questions, one about what is the definition, if you like, or a description, or some words around what is reliability, and then the metaphoric response as well.
So I think reliability is related to, can someone depend on me and can I depend on myself? So there's an aspect of, I think there's an internal aspect and there's an external aspect. So I think the internal stuff is, do I trust myself? Am I committing to things that actually I really bring joy to my life, actually? Or am I committing to stuff that I have to do because I have to do it, not because I'm particularly great at it or want to do it, but I just have to do it, like pay bills or whatever. So I think that's one aspect of it for me. And I think there's an aspect of building trust. So if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. So it's linked to commitment to some extent. There's an element of, do I do stuff to the best of my capability, or do I just do the bare minimum of it? Like if I had a task to do, it's like, And I am a bit of a perfectionist, so it can be a downfall in that respect, because it's something that's never right. It could always be better. And I think reliability towards myself, because it falls into that bracket, and reliability towards other people, I think is a lot easier, actually, for me. Like if I say I'm going to do it, I pretty much do it. I commit to it, I pretty much do it, I pretty much commit to it. And I'm there, and I'm known as being reliable for other people, and the Mother Earth figure, and the listener, and the whatever. So I think there's elements of what makes reliable. What does reliable as an umbrella hold underneath it?
And it strikes me that there's potentially tension there between reliability to others and reliability to yourself. And I'll just give you a simple example. And this is just like a personal hypothetical story, but it would be true. So imagine that this afternoon I've decided to go out for a run because I know that I should do exercise. And a client says, "Oh, hey, Alan, could you fit in a call this afternoon?" I find it really difficult to say, I've already got another commitment, and I tend to accommodate and leave myself short. So that example just popped into my mind when you were talking about how you find it easier to be reliable to others than you do to yourself.
That's happened to me, by the way. I'm just about to take the dog for a walk or do a bit of gardening, and somebody wants a session or whatever. Now, I think it's about choice, actually.
Yeah.
Actually, I think everything in life is about choice, to be really honest about it. But it's like how much, and it's down to, for me now, in a very simple way, it's like how much pleasure will serving a client and maybe being paid or whatever give me versus gardening or whatever else I was going to be doing. And which feels like, I don't say the most essential, but which feels like the most valuable. And I think for me, it's like putting myself first and giving myself the choice, and not feeling an automatic, because I know I've had a pattern of an automatic obligation to say yes. And I think being self-employed or whatever, puts that pressure on, because you don't want to upset a client, you don't want to.
Yeah.
But actually, I think a lot of clients get it now, and it's like they'd rather have a coach that looks after themselves first and can be a role model for that, because that's part of the ethos that I go with. I think they appreciate that. I'm not sure that they like it if I say no, but I have been known to say no. But I could talk to them that following day or later on in the day, depending what time it happens. But that happens quite a lot. I think some of them try it on. But I think you can tell, for me, it's usually the client that phones me directly or contacts me directly, and I can hear from the tone the urgency or the need. And if it just feels like, oh, it's just a nice chat and I've got an hour free this afternoon, really, I'll do what I want to do. If it sounds like I'm really, really struggling here and I will just need a sounding board, and then I'm probably more likely to say yes to them. So it's not just an automatic yes or no.
Yeah. So it's more considered than a kind of knee-jerk response thing. And what about the metaphor then? When you think of the word reliability, what images come to mind? What sounds come to mind? And what feelings come to mind?
I don't really have a sound with it. It's if I was scoping it for I don't say a poem or anything, but actually the sound of reliability for me would be birds singing in the morning. Because probably not so much now as they've fledged and everything, but before they were fledgling, like 4:30 in the morning, the birds were like singing. I could wake up, guaranteed. I could tell you what time it was. I could almost tell you which bird started it. It's like there was a reliability to it, and a bit like a piece of music that you sort of know it's going to start on that note, or it's going to take 3 minutes or whatever it is. I think that's a reliability noise, a sound for me.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feeling is interestingly quite complex for me, because there's a part of me that feels quite proud that somebody would feel they could rely on me, shall we say, and I'm dependable or known as that person or whatever. There's a sort of pride in that and a trust that's been developed and things like that. And there's part of me that goes, oh God, here we go again. So it's a love-hate relationship. I wouldn't say love-hate, it's probably a bit too strong, but it's like there's a yin-yang on it. Do I really want to be known as that reliable, dependable, always there person?
It's interesting that you identify those two sides, because I remember a guy that he was a head of department, and I was responsible for the business. And I had a conversation with him about how he was responsible for the mood that his team went home with. And that would determine how they were viewed by their loved ones, their families, their partners, all the rest of it. And we spoke about how being a team leader was not just a responsibility, and most people think of it in those terms, but it's actually a huge privilege as well. The chance for these, he had around about 30 people in his team of chefs, and to have the privilege to influence the way they go home every day is fantastic, right? And so just that was a kind of bounce back to you in terms of you identifying this, like you say, too strong to say love hate, but this tension, these two sides, the yin yang of reliability. And I share you use the word proud or pride. I take great pride in being seen as reliable, but I sometimes would love the freedom of not having to be so reliable. So there is that kind of draw there. So if we got really practical, then where have you noticed unreliability?
Well, on a more global level, probably every single politician that's ever walked the earth. Because I just don't think you can trust what they say, basically. And for me, as I say, what people commit to or what people say, for me, can't always be sacrosanct, but there's a responsibility in it. Otherwise, it's almost like misleading on some levels, So I would say that level, and it really irritates me. And I think it causes a lot of concerns and fears and pressures or whatever, Which, let's face it, is the way the world is controlled, is coerced into other people's thinking a lot of the time. I think for me, if I look back, and I'm just sort of looking back over the last year or so, it's like the reliability is it encompasses so much. It's almost like there's the choices that I make. Like, am I reliable to do that? Am I capable of doing that? Am I ready to do that? Well, because I get a lot of invitations to do relatively big things or whatever. But it's like, do I feel ready for it? Readiness has always been a big thing for me. But I think reliability links to that to some extent. And that links to confidence and capability or whatever, and self-esteem to some extent. So I think there's a lot around that for me in it. I have to do some work on that a bit, Alan, before I could answer that completely, I think.
Well, let me pick on a couple of things that you've mentioned. Yeah. And we veered into politics. And I think I agree with you in terms of your observation of the behaviours of many politicians. But I sense that that's the tip of the iceberg, and really what sits underneath that is that there is often not good intention. And that drives those sort of behaviours where they will say anything to get the vote, to get in, to get the power, rather than be there to be of service to citizens and do the right thing. And we're recording this in August, and I'm optimistic that at least we now see a glimmer of hope with a different mindset in this country than there was not so long ago. And then the question that you asked about reliability, are you reliable? And when you're asked to do things, I think we do expect sometimes far too much of ourselves. We wouldn't have the same demands on others that we put on ourselves. And so what's that all about? It doesn't seem really very fair, does it?
No, I think it's, this self-care thing is keeping coming up for me at the moment. And it's like, and for me, the self-care is so linked to choicing. It's like, is this the choice that I want to make at this moment? I mean, for example, Pachamama. Is it a choice I want to make now? I did a lot of this stuff with them many years ago. When they first started out, I was one of the first people trained in Awakening the Dreamer programs. But it was like, I trained in it. I delivered a few, didn't really grab me too much. Now, funny enough, they do. So I think timing for lots of things is relevant, and my maturity maybe or immaturity, whichever way you look at it, is probably linked to it as well. And I think there is a timing of things. So maybe the reliability is linked into that as well. It's like I'm reliable at different times of my life for different things.
Yeah, you're making this thing around timing. The relationship that I'm drawing on to that is context. And this is kind of top of my mind at the moment because I've just had a book published which is focused on context rather than content. And what it says is that there's too much stuff just pumped out there. What you really need to do is to understand the unique situation and circumstances in which you need to apply which of that content in order for it to be impactful and effective. And so in coming back to reliability, I'm actually starting to wonder whether reliability is something that I value as much as I think I do, because it's based on the premise of being able to predict and being certain. And yet we all know that we live in a very unpredictable, uncertain world. So it's making me question whether reliability has such an important role to perform as it used to in a more kind of stable status quo.
And that's made me wonder whether what is it? It's almost like, can we actually be reliable? Is it responsible even to be reliable?
Exactly.
And maybe, the reliability is being reliably uninformed about the future. It's almost like, because on one level we can make it what we want to make it, whatever meaning we put to it. But actually, what is reliable? You know, for example, they're saying they want the Ukraine war to finish. Well, I don't know that they do, because the defense people are making a lot of money out of it. The defense, the world is overpopulated on some level. A lot of Ukrainians, I work with a lot of Ukrainians over here, refugees. They don't want to go back because it was such a corrupt political systems or whatever over there, or ways of working or whatever. They quite like it over. And I'm thinking, well, it's corrupt over here, crikey. But it's just not as overt maybe as it is. That's interesting. What is and where? So we reliably inform that they want the war to stop. I don't think they do at all. Yes. And the same with Palestine and Israel. I mean, that's another bugbear for me. I have a lot of friends in Israel. I have an awful lot of friends in Palestine. I lived in Palestine. I lived in Lebanon. Two of the guys that the Israelis have taken out were great peacekeepers, actually, for Hamas. I knew them very well. And it was like, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And they're reliably wanting it all to stop. No, they're not. So, and it's a lot of people's lives are at risk and being damaged as a result. I'm saying, in my opinion, being catastrophically damaged as a result of a few players. Mm-hmm. And a lot of money. So, and it's like, what is reliable then? If life is not sacred, what then becomes, what is it all about?
There's also the knock-on impact potentially of reliability. So again, let me just make up a story. Let's say I've agreed that a group of us will attend some event by a certain time on a given day. And because I tend to attach value to reliability and doing what I say, I might give people a hard time that are wavering as to whether they're going to be there or not. And I'll start to take it personally and be saying to them, look, I've committed that you said you were going to be there. I've laid down that commitment. And so we need to be there. This might be trampling over something that they've got going on in their lives, which might be far more important than attending this thing, whatever it was. And so again, and maybe this is the same with many strengths, that when they're overplayed, they can become really dangerous as well and have a profound negative impact. So I've got, I'm sorry, reliability, but I've got a bit of a downer on you today.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. It's, sometimes I have these moments where I just think the language gets in the way of, or our intentions even behind it, sometimes just get in the way of almost living a peaceful life. Or soul-driven, I call it a soul-driven life. It's like almost, what does the soul or the heart want? Because I don't think anybody's soul, at the real soul level, is anything but peaceful. It wants contentment. It wants some happiness in its life, joyful moments. Doesn't want the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. So do you think...
And I know that's some sort of idealist or whatever way of thinking, but I think there's a part of everybody's like yearning to just, be okay.
And if that was the case, then actually we wouldn't need reliability, right? Because we don't care.
Yeah. It's part of this like belonging, fitting in thing that I was sort of alluding to at one point. It's like most of us are certainly growing up in the education system and everything else is geared towards getting us to fit in to what a society of workaholics wants, basically, or whatever, working ants or whatever want. It almost takes away the nuances or the uniqueness of a person and what they were born to do.
Yeah.
Or, born into a family of doctors, so the likelihood is probably be a doctor, whatever. whether that person wanted to be or not is irrelevant. So, that conditioning that we have as a society, I think it can be really fulfilling. I'm not saying and it can be really a contributing factor, but it can also be so damaging in some level. And, if I've worked with offenders or whatever, there's so many that are so angry and so being dismissed or wanting to be seen and wanting to be validated. They don't know how to do it. They dyslexia or whatever, all these other ADHDs of the world. It's like they just want to be seen, heard, respected.
Yeah.
And have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Now you've lived in different parts of the world. And I'm wondering about the cultural context here, and I'm thinking specifically about South America. I remember doing some training there where it really freaked me out because nobody was turning up on time, right? Nobody was reliable as far as timekeeping is concerned. So do you think, what do you think is the relevance of the societal culture? Because in let's say South American society, if we did a poll, I'm guessing that they would mark reliability lower in importance than perhaps somewhere like the UK or Germany, for instance. I know it's very stereotypical, but have you got a take on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I lived not for very long, for 9 months in Geneva, where, if a bus didn't arrive on time, it was like in the local paper that, the number 26 bus or whatever didn't, arrive 5 minutes late. When I came back here, it was like if it arrived at all, it was a miracle, So, and I was so bored in Geneva, I can't tell you on many levels, because everything was so organized and so this and so that. There wasn't really much. It was black or white, or it was, even shades of grey were like very defined. And it was like, I don't know. I can't say a huge amount about working in South America. I've been to Chile, I've been to Peru, but Chile was a conference of coaches where we all arrived on time and everything, because and we were all multinational, I guess, as well. And Peru, I was doing some shamanic stuff, so it's slightly different. But I did have a CEO. If I don't think he'll listen to this, but if he does, he's called James, and he'll know exactly who he is. And he was based in Milan, of African parentage, but a very, very well-regarded capital venture guy. And he would never arrive on time. I mean, if we were starting at 3:00, if I saw him by 3:15, it was a breakthrough, basically, because he'd always have to have a black coffee. He had a routine of meeting somebody, and it had to go through this routine to get into the sync of it or whatever. And it used to irritate the life out of me because I'd be catching a flight back and I'd have to get from his office in Milan to the airport to the, I used to try and do Milan in a day sort of thing. And we laugh about it now. And even his wife, she just go, oh, well, yeah, I'll say to him, we're eating at 6:15 and I'll cook for 6:45 because there's a chance that he'll get back home or whatever then. So I think you sort of accommodate someone on some level. But he had a lot of pressures, and I'm not making that the right, reason for him being not on time or anything, but it was just his way of doing business. And I had to start changing my mode and way of doing business when I was with him, but supporting him. Having said that, his team would laugh as well. It's like, oh, well, no, we plan a meeting, we put a meeting in the diary for 3:00, but we never arrived till past.
And that's an interesting...
So they would give themselves half an hour, because they knew we wouldn't be there.
This touches the leadership shadow stuff, because whilst he might laugh about it and his close associates might laugh about it, I'm curious to know what the impact would be in the wider organization
Mm,
of a senior leader behaving in that way, because
mm,
it basically endorses
mm,
late. And if you extrapolate that, so then you've got members representing the organization perhaps turning up late with clients and attending a meeting where there are 10 other people. And if you're 5 minutes late, that's 50 minutes of time that's
mm,
wasted.
mm,
That really rankles with me when people don't appreciate the knock-on effect of their
mm.
shortcomings, for want of a better term. And the other thing that's just come to my mind is another strange example, but reliability also, I think, in some instances, provides you with freedom and space. And what I mean by that is that in the kitchen, for instance, I like everything to be where it should be. And the reason why is because I don't want to waste time looking for a pan.
Mm,
I want to be able to put my hand on it, and that gives me time to do other stuff that I want to be able to do. So I'm pleased that I found a positive note about reliability here, because I do value that enormously. And I think people that don't attach importance to that can be wasting a lot of time actually doing things that are unnecessary, which could be spent doing much more enjoyable things.
mm.
You in the kitchen.
Well, yeah, and I think that, I mean, in the kitchen, I think it links to health and safety and things like that. It's not just, do I want to put my hand in a drawer and cut myself on a knife because the knife's been thrown in the wrong way round and it's facing it, the blade's facing upwards or whatever, or whatever. I know, because I live in the countryside, quite a lot of friends come to visit me and they're always wanting to do the washing up for one reason. It's like, and I just say, no, please let me do it, because I know where stuff goes. I know where my knives, I have a thing for these knives. I have, I don't mind them scraping carrots or whatever, but when it comes to putting stuff away, I have a sort of routine for it. I have a sort of placing of it. So I know what you mean by that. My knives tend to be sharp because I bought myself a knife sharpener the other day, so now they're even sharper than before. But it's like, yeah, I know what you mean in that, and I think there is a safety element, and I think reliable. It's like I can remember using a metaphor once. It's like um, flying. Yeah, you've just come back from holiday. Well, I would rather have a pilot flying the plane that's actually flown a plane before, not just read how to fly a plane out of a book.
Yeah.
So there's something about reliability and experience is linked to experience, or good experience. I would say they'll fly well, whatever. And now I suppose the computers take over a lot of it anyway. But it's like, actually, I'd still like to know that there's somebody in charge of that plane and my baggage on it that knows how to land the thing if anything happened.
Yes.
And reliably train, the stewards or whatever, stewardesses are trained if somebody had a heart attack or whatever, if they know what to do, they're not fumbling around at the last minute. So there's something about systems, actually, is probably what it's alluding to. There's a system, I think, involved in reliability, because it's like, what does it really mean at the depth of it all? And I think it's a system and capability, and I suppose within that training, whatever. But I know with trainings, and I've gone on loads of trainings, and before in my time, it's like there's some trainings that I'll remember to my last day, and there was some trainings that I've forgotten about before I'd even walked out of the room, basically. So, and certainly with online stuff, you retain probably about 4% of what's there. Mm-hmm. So, I think it moves into lots of different dimensions, actually, and also about how do we instill that level of importance around either reliability or whatever the behavioural value is? Because I think if people don't know the why, it's almost like anything. It's like if you haven't got a why, a big why, you're not likely to do something different. Like in our coaching, we'll say it's I'm a commitment to whatever it is. It's important because if there isn't a big why in there, why it's important, it's not going to happen. It'll fizzle out. And I'll celebrate when is the third bit. And it's like, because most of us, we achieve something, we're on to something else. We're firefighting, we're on to something else. We never stop and actually celebrate who we've become or what we've learned or how we've grown even as a result of that. And I think if any training or commitment or whatever hasn't got that growth aspect in it, it's not an excitement aspect in it, a slight passion to it to some extent. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and it's time to draw the ValuesJam, actually, which is in a way a shame because I could talk about this for quite a bit longer. I think. But the question to finish up with is, what are you encouraged to do differently about reliability as a result of this conversation?
I think I'm being invited by yourself and maybe a bigger universe to really look at what reliability is and really challenge myself on it, of the different aspects of it, and notice where maybe I might be procrastinating on something or whatever. So yeah, on the upside of it and the not so great side of it.
And how are you going to do that?
Probably journaling, because that's one of my sort of go-to. I'd probably have a like-minded conversation with my colleagues. Probably introduce it as a pause circle, because actually the pause is focusing a bit more on belonging and community building, because I did a lot of stuff with Scott Peck in the past. And so this could well be a topic actually that we look at as part of belonging. Like, if you belong, can you be, what does it mean? And I think reliability is an aspect of it, actually.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because the phrase "I've got your back" comes to mind.
Yeah.
Is what you say to each other when you feel a sense of belonging and togetherness, and that's, you can rely on each other, right? I think mine's quite a small and simple thing. I'm going to be making sure that I focus on the why when I'm thinking about whether something needs to be reliable or is reliable or isn't reliable, because it's only when, I think this conversation's made me realize, it's only when you attach the because to reliability that you can really understand it, because otherwise you're just talking about it in isolation, in a vacuum kind of thing, rather than whereas in fact it's connected to other things as well. And asking the because or the why helps you to understand it a lot more. So that's what I'm going to be doing.
Okay, and going back to your book, I think it's the context, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So this is an unusual experience for me, because normally at the end of a ValuesJam, I experience a sense of completion, whereas actually this is almost the opposite.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't apologize. It feels a bit weird because it's unusual, but it feels quite good as well, because it's like I tried to close the door, but instead it's opened a different one. So thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
And enjoy your continuation of your journaling, because I remember you said at the beginning that you had been journaling on this morning. So I hope you're going to be encouraged to continue that. And thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Cheers.
Cheers.